it was completed in 1937. Nestled in the heart of the eastern United States, the Appalachian Trail, or the AT as it's affectionately called by hikers, is a 2,193-mile trail that cuts through several other national state parks. It starts in northern Georgia and ends in Maine, and usually takes about 8 months to hike it completely through. And yes, there are through hikers that do the entire thing. According to records, more than 3 million people hike a portion of the trail each year, with an estimated 800 to 900 through hikers completing the world's longest hiking trail. I grew up in southern Appalachia. I have hiked on the AT. I've hiked on it in just about every state that it goes through, except I think for Maine. The longest single stretch I've ever done was from the terminus in Georgia back up through the Smokies into Damascus, Virginia. I wore much younger man's clothes at the time, though. Took about 3 months to do it, but I wasn't in any hurry. The changes in elevation through the trip have been equated to climbing Mount Everest 16 times, and it's been called the most dangerous hiking trail in the world. There have been 13 people reported murdered on the Appalachian Trail since 1974. Some of the disappearances and murders are unsolved to this day. Each year, reported injuries range from minor to serious, including broken bones, falls, animal encounters, and, sadly, human-on-human assaults. Those especially aren't uncommon on the Appalachian Trail. Also reported are missing people and fatalities. These are minimal, but they still happen. Here are a few of the documented cases by order of the year in which they happened. First, we have an unsolved case. Jeff Hagg. On February 9, 1970, 16-year-old Jeff Hagg was hiking in the Great Smokies National Park with Eagle Scout Troop 95, which included 2 other scouts and 3 troop leaders. The hike started in Tennessee, and they were to spend the night in North Carolina near the Appalachian Trail and return the following day. On the return trip, all was going well, except for one of the scouts was lagging a few minutes behind the others, the aforementioned Jeff Hagg. Jeff sat down at the trail fork for a break and some water. When the group started on the trail again, Jeff asked if he could stay behind and wait for the other scouts. Agreeing to let him as they were close to their destination, the group leader and 3 others headed on down the trail to the parking lot, which was less than 30 minutes away. Sadly, that was the last time Jeff Hagg was seen alive. His disappearance was immediately reported and a search began. For 10 days, search and rescue teams joined law enforcement as well as game warden services to search for the Eagle Scout. On day 10, 16-year-old Jeff Hagg was found frozen to death, missing a shoe, with his pants around his ankles. Now, this could be attributed to the condition called paradoxical undressing, which happens in the late stages of hypothermia, where the person feels though they are too hot and start removing their clothes. This makes a bad situation worse. Removing clothing only aids the hypothermia in chilling the core temperature much quicker. His pack was found about 1,000 feet away with the contents scattered, and the pack itself in the middle of the river on a rock. This case was compared to a similar case in California, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, where a Boy Scout went missing when he fell behind the rest of the Scouts. That case, which we've covered, happened July 19, 1991. 12-year-old Jared Negrete was on his first backpacking trip with his Boy Scout troop when they were summiting Mount San Gorgonio in the San Bernardino National Forest. A search for Jared turned up a camera with a haunting last picture of the 12-year-old. They also found a few candy wrappers. Sadly, the Boy Scout was never found despite some of the largest searches ever conducted on National Forest grounds. These 2 cases are similar, but with one being found deceased and the other not being found at all. Again, authorities and trail experts tell all hikers to never hike these trails alone. Next, we have Jesse Albertine Hoover. In May of 1983, 54-year-old Texas native Jesse Albertine Hoover set out on a solo hike on the Appalachian Trail as a through hiker, taking the Maine to Georgia route. Hoover had read about the famous trail in a National Geographic article, and after her husband was tragically killed in a car accident in 1982, she decided to try the hike alone. Making her way from White Settlement, Texas, Hoover chose to start the hike from Maine, which is the most treacherous part of the trail. Before leaving Texas, Jessie made several plans and an itinerary for the ill-fated trip, informing family of scheduled stops for supplies and money along the way. She also contacted her physician, made plans for the epilepsy medicine she would need refilled while she was gone. Against her family's wishes that she not go, Hoover assured them that she would be fine and the trail was perfectly safe for a woman of her age. When Jessie arrived at the starting point in Maine, she would have been met with a sign from the Forestry Service warning hikers that this section of the trail, referred to as the 100-mile wilderness, was dangerous and without any services. The sign clearly says, Appalachian Trail, caution, there are no places to obtain supplies or get help until Able Bridge, 100 miles north. Do not attempt this section unless you have a minimum of 10 days' supplies and are fully equipped. This is the longest wilderness section of the entire AT, and its difficulty should not be underestimated. Good hiking, MATC. This wouldn't have been a rare decision because as many as 10% of hikers start their journey in Maine get the most difficult section over with in the beginning, rather than wait until they're exhausted at the end of their through hike. Also, aside from the elevation, terrain, and weather that can impede hikers, is their supply pack's weight. 8 to 10 days of water, food, first aid, personal shelter, and clothing, that could weigh up to 35 to 50 pounds. That's the equivalent of strapping a kindergartner to your back and hiking up in elevation for 100 miles. Hoover started her hike on May 16, 1983, south of Baxter State Park. After her family hadn't heard from her in almost 2 months, her sister called and reported her missing to the Warden Services on July 11, 1983. This is when officials learned that Hoover was sorely unprepared for the adventure, having only beef jerky for food and light clothing. A search was initiated using her itinerary and talking to area hikers as well as a ranger that advised the search team that Hoover tried to climb Mount Katahdin on May 20th, 1983, but didn't have the proper equipment, in his words. He therefore advised her not to push forward. Oddly enough, this is the same area where 30 years later, Geraldine Jerry Largay would also perish while trying to negotiate the Appalachian Trail. Searchers and law enforcement descended on the area, continuing to ask anyone if they had seen Hoover. A maintenance worker for the Able Gatehouse on Golden Road, a passageway built in the early 1970s for access to the now-defunct Great Northern Paper Company, stated he had seen a woman fitting Jessie Hoover's description in late May, walking towards the 100-mile wilderness trailhead. This was the last confirmed sighting of the missing hiker. The search area was hundreds of miles of trails that aren't well marked and over 15 million acres, if you can imagine that, of dense forest. A daunting task at best. In the over 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail, as we stated, this is the worst area for a hiker to become lost in. Authorities and search teams spent the remainder of the summer asking hikers if they had seen Hoover and to keep an eye out for anything that was out of place that may lead them to her whereabouts. And they searched for her themselves, but to no avail. Another unnamed hiker went missing in the same area around the same time Jessie Hoover went missing. Search and rescue teams and police kept a lookout for Hoover's blue backpack, clothes, gear, or anything that belonged to her. The other hiker was found alive, but Jessie Hoover was never heard from nor seen again. Theories as to what happened to Jessie vary, but the most popular opinions are that she became lost and either succumbed to the elements and or starvation, or she had a medical event from her epilepsy and perished due to that. Jessie Hoover was a widow looking to broaden her horizons and become one with nature. She'd never hiked such a long distance, though, and was ill prepared to tackle the hardest part of the Appalachian Trail alone. Even seasoned hikers who thru-hiked it before advise against solo hiking the trail due to the dangers and potential disorientation. Weather often changes quickly in the area and can still be in the 30s to 40s, the low, in May. Hikers are advised to take hiking and outdoor skills classes before attempting the world's longest hiking trail. Even then, solo hiking is usually a bad idea and should never be attempted. We have the sad case of Scott Lilly. On Friday, October 12, 2011, the remains of 30-year-old Scott Lilly of South Bend, Indiana, were found by a group of hikers on the Appalachian Trail at Cow Camp Gas Shelter in the George Washington/Jefferson National Forest. Scott was a veteran hiker and had started his hike in Virginia on June 15, 2011, and as he was a Civil War buff, he wanted to camp in the area to do some exploring. He had taken the trail name of Stonewall, which some speculate is a reference to Stonewall Jackson, who died as a result of friendly fire in 1863. The last time anyone heard from Scott Lilly was on July 31, 2011, when he had climbed the peak known as the Priest in Nelson County, Virginia. His plan was to hitch a ride the next day and re-up on his supplies in a nearby town. However, he never made it, and no one heard from him again. 12 days later, Scott Lilly's remains were found in a shallow grave near the shelter. An autopsy revealed Lilly died from asphyxia by suffocation, making the manner of his death certainly a homicide. In interviews conducted by authorities, it was said that Scott had a backpack, new Ozark hiking boots, an Appalachian Trail handbook, and a Nintendo game system. None of these items were ever recovered. There was no motive given by police as to why they think Scott Lilly was murdered, other than obvious signs. At the time of Billy's murder, there were several other homicide investigations, including the 1996 killing of 2 women in Shenandoah National Park, and several other death investigations in the George Washington and Jefferson National Park areas. Despite the best efforts of the police, the Scott Lilly homicide remains unsolved, as well as the Williams and Winan case, which were the 2 ladies in Shenandoah, which is very near the Appalachian Trail. Next up, another sad tale. Geraldine Jerry Largay. 66-year-old retired Air Force nurse Jerry Largay was an admitted nature lover. She moved from her home she shared with her husband in Florida to Tennessee in order to take hiking classes and be closer to the Appalachian Trail. She assured family members that she could hike the trail herself, and despite the warnings from her loved ones and all the known dangers, Jerry was adamant that she was going to conquer the Appalachian Trail. Jerry set out on her adventure near Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, on April 23, 2013, with a friend, Jane Lee, so she wouldn't be hiking alone. The plan was to hike from the middle of the Appalachian Trail north to Mount Katahdin in Maine, then take a ferry back to the starting point and finish the southern portion of the trail last, hiking into northern Georgia. Largay's husband would periodically meet the women to restock supplies as she wasn't able to carry a heavy backpack due to an old back injury. June would be the beginning of the first problems with the hike when Jane had to leave due to a family emergency. Lee would later reveal that Jerry had problems keeping pace with her and couldn't properly use the compass. By July, though, Largay had hiked over 900 miles, leaving only 200 miles left to reach the terminus in Maine. This portion of the trail, though, is notoriously strenuous, treacherous, and the vegetation is unforgivingly thick. Jerry stepped off the main path but for a moment for a bathroom break, but by the time she'd finished, she found herself lost. At this point, she tried messaging her husband asking for help, but she had no cell signal. The many texts never went through, unbeknownst to her. A storm had hit the area Largay was hiking the night before contact was lost, so when her husband hadn't heard from her on the first day, he wasn't that alarmed. But by day 2, he knew there was a problem and contacted the authorities. Aerial and canine searches were conducted along with interviews with other area hikers for tips they may have had, but nothing was found. Jerry Largay spent 26 days trying to find her way out and documenting her plight in a journal. On the 26th day, 66-year-old Jerry Largay passed away from what the coroner would eventually determine was exposure. 2 full years after she went missing, a hiker contacted authorities and reported having found a dilapidated tent with human remains inside. Police Lieutenant Kevin Adam received word about this discovery and knew there were a few possibilities of what this hiker had found, one of those possibilities being Jerry Largay. After having been missing for 2 years, Largay was found in an arched tent with a few personal effects, including her journal, of which was updated to the day she presumably passed away. Her last written wish was for her husband and daughter to be able to read her final words. When authorities reached the area, there was evidence that Largay had tried to draw attention to her plight by starting a fire. There were charred trees where she had presumably tried to set them on fire, but because of the damp atmosphere, it would have been almost impossible to get a green tree going. There was also a clearing near where she was found that if she had known about it, Aerial searches conducted in the area would have possibly been successful. Jerry Largate's body was just 2 miles off the Appalachian Trail when her remains were found. The family thanked authorities for their continued hard work and dedication in the case and asked the public for privacy as they grieved their loss. Next, we have Chad Austin. On May 27, 2019, 30-year-old Chad Austin went missing while out for a hike near the Appalachian Trail on the Blue Ridge Parkway east of Panther Falls. His vehicle and dog were found abandoned at the parking area. Dog was alive and well. Austin was reported missing, and a search began but turned up nothing. A few months later, on December 22, 2019, his wallet was found by a hiker, but there was still no sign of the missing man. The wallet wasn't weathered, which led the authorities to believe that it had been placed there recently. It contained his driver's license and other personal effects. Eerily, this is the same area where the previously mentioned Scott Lilly's remains were found. Then, in March of 2020, the skeletal remains of Chad Austin were located, and authorities stated they started an investigation into the death as a homicide, but didn't release any other details. They did say that they, quote, are confident someone in the surrounding community has critical information that could lead to the arrest of those responsible, end quote. Police are asking for the assistance of the public in this case. If you have any information or saw Chad Austin the day he went missing, please contact the Virginia State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigations at 800-542-5959 or 540-375-9589. Anonymous tips can also be placed or emails sent to questions@vsp.virginia.gov. Next, we have the case of Michael Kaiser. On Saturday, October 12, 2019, 56-year-old expert adventure hiker Michael William Kaiser made his last known phone call to his brother before he went missing in the Bear Rocks area of Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. Kaiser entered the Appalachian Trail on October 11, 2019, near an area known as Bake Oven Knob in Lee County Township to do some hiking. Considered an expert hiker, he was very familiar with the area and had told family members where he would be, even stopping to send his brother a picture of the area where he was that day. Well, the next day, though, no one had heard any more from Kaiser, prompting his brother to contact authorities to report Kaiser missing. A search party assembled in hopes they would be able to locate the missing man, but initially found nothing. On October 16, 2019, police found a Ford F-150 in the parking lot of the area where family members told them that their relative had started his hike from. The truck was determined to be that of Michael Kaiser, but he was nowhere to be found. Family members joined the search teams in the last known area where Kaiser said he was, where teams searched for days. Then on Thursday, October 17th, an unnamed family member saw what looked to be a body at the bottom of a rocky embankment. Police later identified these remains as those of missing hiker Michael Kaiser. It is unknown if he slipped and fell, if there was a rock slide, or if he had a medical event. The family thanked the police, the search and rescue teams, and the community for their support and help in searching for their loved one. There was no plans to close the trail, and there was a no threat to the public comment released by the police. Have another case where the person was found. Brittany Pulley. On December 4th, 2021, 32-year-old Brittany Pulley started a hike north on the Appalachian Trail alone when she went missing in the state of Virginia. She had started her hike from the McCormick Gap area in southern Shenandoah Valley and was wearing proper attire for the time of year and climate. Pulley wore a black jacket, gloves, a wool hat, and was equipped with survival gear that included a hydration pack, backpack, and a one-person tent, all of which helped aid in her survival. It is unknown who reported Miss Pulley missing or what prompted the search. However, she was reported missing on Christmas Eve. Authorities found her car at the Appalachian Trailhead at McCormick Gap. Pulley was missing for 12 to 13 days before a park ranger in the area found and made contact with Brittany on January 5, 2022. No other details were available other than that she was found safe. And then, on January 2nd, 2014, Sean Hood, Stephen White, Jonathan Dobbins, all of Gaffney, South Carolina, had planned a winter hike on the Appalachian Trail starting on January 2nd. The trio started the ill-fated trip from the Fontana Dam area in North Carolina, which I will say is one of my favorite areas in the Smokies. The men were in clothing that was less favorable for the climate, though, and winter temperatures as daytime highs reached around 45 degrees, you can drop down into the 20s, with the low being minus 6 degrees Fahrenheit. They took a propane torch, of which they used to burn some of their gear to stay warm, and later claimed that they'd watched weather reports to plan for the trip. However, they'd taken cotton clothing and no tent. Rain had been forecasted for the area, and without proper shelter, aided in causing hypothermia in the three men. Having been defeated by the weather and suffering from moderate hypothermia, one of the men summoned help via cell phone. By the time help arrived, the men were so cold they couldn't walk on their own. Authorities, along with search and rescue, reached the men, and they were airlifted to Asheville Memorial Hospital in North Carolina, where they were treated for frostbite, mild, moderate hypothermia, and then released. Authorities commented how lucky Hood, White, and Dobbins were, given where they were in the lack of essential equipment for what they were attempting to do. The Appalachian Trail can be treacherous in the summer when weather is more favorable for hiking. The men did make a full recovery, though, thanks to area search and rescue, Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, and the lifeflight crew. Kenneth Knight. In April 2017, 42-year-old Kenneth Knight and 6 friends found themselves on the Appalachian Trail, embarking upon a 60-mile hike from Petite's Gap to Peaks of Otter Lodge in Virginia. Knight had hiked this specific area before via the south-north route and was familiar with it as he had completed over 1,700 miles. The Appalachian Trail has a blaze system set up for hikers to help mark trails and keep hikers on the right path. Now, there are several different colors used. For example, white is used to mark the main path, so there would be a white paint mark on random trees along the trail, assuring people that they were on the correct trail. Other paint colors signify water, shelters, and rest areas. Knight knew of the blaze system, but because he's legally blind and only has one eye, the marks were difficult for him to see and determine what color they were. With adequate gear in hand, the 7 friends started their journey. Knight was using this hike for a warm-up for the Scotland Great Outdoor Challenge he would be starting in a month, and decided to go at his own pace as the group had established a meeting spot should they become separated. And that's exactly how Knight's 6 days lost in the Virginia wilderness began. As the main group forged ahead of Knight, they created a gap between themselves and him before he knew what was happening. He'd lost sight of his hiking companions and was now on a game trail. Not knowing how far he was on this new path and becoming panicked, Knight tried to calm himself and remember the basics of hiking, which was if you become lost, stay put, seek shelter, and don't panic. Thick forest surrounded Knight, and the trail was littered with foliage, making a clear direction hard to discern. Knowing there was no water in this area concerned him, and because of that, Knight decided to go down an embankment to a stream he was familiar with. The descent was steep and craggy, with rocks jutting out from the forest floor, but eventually he could hear the relieving sound of water and finally had made his way to the creek, which was fed by the James River. Knight decided this would be the area where he'd wait for help. As day 1, 2, and 3 passed, though, Knight became concerned that he had made the wrong decision by not staying where he was when he originally become lost. He quickly pushed that thought aside, though, as he knew he needed water, and this stream would keep him alive for the time being. On day 4, Knight hoped his hiking companions would realize he was missing and contact help. He rationed his remaining food and never ventured more than a quarter of a mile away from the spot he chose to mark for help with a rescue blanket. He would mark the area with piles of rocks so as not to lose his way back. He also packed up his gear if he ventured more than a few feet from the site, ensuring that he at least had his sleeping bag, food, and shelter with him should he venture too far away and become even further lost. The threat of injury to himself was never far away either, with rocks or other hazards, so he had to be careful to not seriously injure himself, so that if he needed to make his way to the James River, he could at least walk there to seek help. Then, on day 5, Knight began to wonder if the group noticed he was missing at all, and thought about leaving his water source to make his way to the James River, but decided against it for the time being, keeping in mind that he would possibly have to use this as a possible escape route should help not come soon, as his food rations were beginning to dwindle. On day 6, all Knight's food was gone, and he woke depressed. He had now been alone for almost an entire week, and knew he now must take more risks to help himself. In a last-ditch effort to be found, Knight said, I cleared some land to make a bigger fire, but not so big that I couldn't put it out, and planned my exit. Just a few short hours later, after everything he had been through, Knight heard voices, and soon a team of firefighters, looking for the smoke source, made their way to Knight. He was happy and relieved to see them. As a few of the men put out Knight's fire lifeline, the others checked him over and prepared him for rescue. The firefighters helped him pack his items, and before he knew it, they were at a trailhead. Hungry, but really no worse for the wear, Kenneth Knight, missing for 6 days on the Appalachian Trail, was rescued, thanks to helping himself remain calm and signaling for help, but he was more than ready to be rescued when the time came. The group Knight had been with was under the misconceived impression that they were going to meet him at the end of the hike in peaks of Otter Lodge. Knight was quoted as saying, "Waiting was the hardest part." Knight was rescued and taken to an area hospital where he was treated and released. The group he was hiking with he had met on an online forum. They had eventually called authorities when they reached the final destination, and Knight wasn't there. The search had started about 2 days before he was actually found. Well, there you have it, folks. Some interesting stories, some sad, some miraculous, from the Appalachian Trail. If you're in the area and have the chance, I recommend hiking on the Appalachian Trail, but use these tales as cautionary measures. Don't go alone. Be prepared. Live to tell the tale. I look forward to your comments, but please keep it friendly and respectful. Till we meet again, be good to yourselves and each other, and stay safe out there. I don't want to make a video about you. As for me, I'll see you a little further on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time. Tell your animals I said hi.
Hey, Creepy Crew,